This is a short video explaining the solution to the Networking 1 Lab 7. Our requirement is to have laptop 1 be able to ping laptop 0, laptop 2, laptop 3 and laptop 4 successfully. To do that, we must ensure that the network is connected correctly and configured correctly. First of all, we're going to configure router 1. We need to ensure the interface FA00 is in fact up and running. And we'll go into that configuration, interface FA00, assign an IP address, which is 192.168.2.1. We bring the interface up. We should now be able to ping laptop 1 from the router, and using the correct IP address as follows, we should have success, and we're now successfully connecting between router 1 and laptop 1. The next thing we should check in OR1 is that the static routes are configured correctly. So let's have a look at what we do have configured. So IP route, and if we have a look at the 172 network for a start, which are the IP addresses for the routers, we can see that we have 172.16.1, 2, 3, 4 and 5 currently configured, and for the 192 we have network 1, 2, 3, 4 and 5 also configured. So at this point it would look like OR1 does in fact have the correct static networks already configured. If we have a look at OR0, we can see again that we have the correct networks in the routing table. All of the networks that we would expect to see at this point are there. The 172.16.1, 2, 3, 4 and 5, and the 192.168.1, 2, 3, 4 and 5 are also there. We can see that there's a line break between OR2 and laptop 2. If I have a look at laptop 2's configuration, you'll notice that the issue here is that the subnet mask for this network should be 255.255.255.0 and not 252. And if I correct this as follows, that should be now configured correctly. I'll need to check the interface on router 2. And I can see that I don't have the 192 network as a direct connection on the system. I'll have to go in and configure this interface. So interface FA00, set the IP address as 192.168.3.1, and we'll configure the line to come up, so no shutdown, and we should have that line now running correctly. We'll just verify this by pinging the actual laptop, so ping 192.168.3.254 as follows, ping 192.168.3.254. And at this point we can see we are now connecting correctly between OR2 and laptop 2. And next we're going to review the OR3 configuration. Now we look at the routing table here, we can see that we are in fact missing some static routes. We have a static route to 192.168.1, 192.168.4, so we're in fact missing a number of, in fact that's a directly connected network. We're missing static routes back to 192.168.2, 3 and 192.168.5. So let's go and configure those. What we're going to do is ensure that we know the interface to send the static route out when we actually do configure it. So conf t, we're going to configure a route for 192.168.2.0. Give the correct subnet mask. And next we have to determine which is the interface we're going to send this out. So we're currently on OR3 here. So we want to have packets destined for the 192.168.2 network come out of the serial 000 interface. And we just add that on here. So, and we will also have to configure this for the following network, 192.168.3. And we've one more static route to insert, which will go out to network 5 as follows. But this goes out a different interface. To get to 192.168.5, we need to go out the serial interface 001. Make the final change as follows. Now if we have a look at our static routes, we should have configured the 192.168 for all of the networks. And finally we're going to have a look at OR4. Have a look at the routing table. And we see that we have one directly connected network and we have 3 static routes configured. If we have a closer look at the system, we in fact should have 2 directly connected networks and we need static routes for all of the following. So we need to insert a number of static routes after we get the interface FA00 up and running. So let's configure the interface first. FA00. Set the IP address for this as follows: 192.168.5.1, and we will bring the interface up. Okay, let's move that to one side. And assuming we have configured laptop 4 correctly, we should now be able to ping between 04 and laptop 4. Let me just verify that. 192.168.5.254. And once this is successful, we can then start inserting the remaining static routes. And there we go. So let's insert our static routes for the 192 network. So we're going to look at IP route for 192.168.1.0, and to ensure we're going out to correct interface, it is serial 010. Just verify that's correct as follows. Now we can insert the remaining static routes, all going out the same interface: 2, 3, and 4. Now let's have a look at our routing table. And we should have all of our networks in the routing table for each of the routers, and we should have the correct configuration for each of the laptops. The next part of this lab is to remove all of the static routes from the system and to configure RIP version 1. I'm going to start with router 2, and you see that we have a number of static routes already inserted, so what we have to do is to unconfigure each of these one by one. So use the following no IP route command. So in our case we'll start with the 172.16.1.0. We successfully removed that route, and we removed the remaining ones. So network 4, and we'll now eliminate the 192.168. 1.1.0 as follows, and the remaining 3 networks also have to be removed. So .4 and .5. And now we should not see any static routes in a routing table. So show IP route. See only directly connected networks. This is for router 2. Now I've already configured this for router 1, router 0, router 3, and router 4. So at this point we've cleaned all of the static networks from the system and we're ready to configure RIP version 1. We're ready now to configure a RIP on each of the routers. So if we open up router 0, we will go conft router RIP, and now we specify the networks. So network are directly connected networks 172.16.1.0 as follows, and 192.168.1.0. And RIP should now be running on this router, and I'll do the same for each of the routers in turn. So for router 1, we have 3 connected interfaces, 172.16.1.0, .2.0, and 192.168.2.0. I'll move on to router 2 and do the same configuration. Router RIP, and network 172.16.2.0 and .3.0, 192.168.3.0, and that's router 2 configured. And we'll configure router RIP, and again we have 3, so network 172.16.3.0, network 172.16.4.0, and finally 192.168.4.0, which only leaves all 4, and this only has 2 interfaces. So network 172.16.4.0 and 192.168.5.0. So we've now configured all the interfaces for RIP version 1. If we have a look at each of our routing tables, we should see entries entered by the RIP version 1 protocol. Show IP route, and you can see the OR here indicating that this has been populated from messages from another router using the RIP protocol. And that's the configuration for RIP version 1. So if we ping the first laptop, laptop 0, we're successfully connecting.